Hello, family. Enjoy this great and beautiful moment with Afri Stories. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and comment. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and don't miss future videos from us. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Lily Monroe was on her final warning. With rent overdue and her bills mounting, she couldn't afford any more mistakes. That night, her boss shoved a bulky parcel into her arms. "Deliver this to the Blackwood Mansion." "No screw-ups," he snapped, his voice sharp with impatience. When Lily arrived at the iron gates near midnight, bright lights revealed a frenzied scene. Staff lugging flowers and decorations, as if a grand event were underway. Guards stopped her, but before she could speak, someone shouted, "There's the bride." She was pulled inside, her protest lost in the chaos swirling through the entry hall. Under glittering chandeliers, elegant guests buzzed with nervous energy. At the center of it all stood a tall, stern man radiating chilly authority. Damian Blackwood. A frantic wedding planner cornered Lily, her eyes wild. The bride fled. "If this wedding doesn't happen, Mr. Blackwood loses everything. You're wearing white, good enough." In a daze, Lily found herself at the altar. Damian's glare pinned her in place, his dark eyes sharp. A pen was shoved into her hand, pointing to a marriage license. Before she could protest, Damian signed. The officiant asked, "Do you take this woman to be your wife?" His answer was grim, "I do." All eyes turned to Lily. Someone nudged her from behind, and she stammered, "I do." Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. In an instant, Lily had become Mrs. Blackwood. A bouquet was thrust at her, and Damian locked an arm around hers. He lowered his voice. "Don't make a scene," he warned. Bewildered, she let him guide her through a flurry of rose petals and cheers. They slipped into a quiet corridor. Shaken, Lily jerked free. "This is insane," she hissed. "I'm just a delivery girl. I don't know you." His gaze was ice. "My fiancé abandoned me, jeopardizing a massive business merger. You showed up in time to salvage the deal." Her pulse raced. "That's not my problem. Let me go." He crossed his arms, jaw tight. "You signed the license. My lawyers will ensure it's binding. Cooperate or face a legal nightmare." Outrage flared in Lily's chest. "You can't hold me hostage." His expression hardened. "We have a deal now, unwilling or not. Play your part and you won't suffer." Forced back into reception, Lily was bombarded by congratulations and camera flashes. She spotted the package she'd come to deliver lying abandoned on a table, mocking the turn her life had taken. When the guests finally dispersed, Damian escorted her up a grand staircase to a lavish suite. "Stay here," he ordered. "We'll talk in the morning." Without another word, he turned on his heel and left. Heart pounding, Lily searched for her phone. It was missing, lost in a frenzy. She felt trapped in a mansion she didn't know, wedded to a stranger who clearly had no intention of letting her go. She spent a sleepless night in the opulent bedroom. Memories of the day flickered through her mind. The final warning from her boss, the mysterious package, the moment the crowd mistook her for the missing bride. She kept telling herself this was a nightmare. But morning would come, and she'd still be Mrs. Blackwood. At dawn, a maid brought breakfast, addressing Lily as Mrs. Blackwood. The title chilled her. Soon after, she was summoned to Damian's office. Light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating his cold features. He wasted no time. "We have rules," he stated. "You will act as my wife until my business merger is secure. Step out of line, and my legal team will bury you. When the time comes, we'll end this farce." Her voice trembled with anger. Why not just admit the wedding was a mistake? He set his jaw. Investors need to see stability. A broken engagement would sabotage everything. "You're here because I have no other option." She stared at him, fury and fear battling in her chest. "So I'm just a convenient placeholder." His eyes flickered, but he offered no hint of remorse. "Do as you're told. You'll walk away once this is over." Dismissed, Lily left the office, dread coiling in her stomach. She was completely at his mercy. If she ran now, he'd destroy her financially, or even worse. "Naomi, The personal assistant appeared with a polite bow. "Shall I show you around, Mrs. Blackwood?" Lily's cheeks burned, but she forced a nod. As they walked, staff greeted her with deference, reminding her that her cage was gilded yet very real. Sumptuous ballrooms, priceless art, and lush gardens, all overshadowed by the knowledge she was trapped. That evening, she found herself alone at an enormous dining table, the seat at the head conspicuously empty. Damien was busy cementing his precious deals. Despite the luxurious meal, she barely ate. Later, in the suite, she discovered a new phone on the nightstand, locked and likely monitored. Fury simmered as she realized how thoroughly Damien controlled her world. Sleep eluded her again. She paced the extravagant bedroom, recalling the life she'd had, cramped but free. Now, every second felt dictated by a man whose motives were hidden behind icy eyes. Yet giving up wasn't in her nature. She might be stuck, but she refused to be powerless. She would learn Damien's secrets, discover the reason behind this sham marriage. Her only chance at freedom lay in understanding her captor. By the time dawn lightened the horizon, Lily's determination burned as fiercely as her anger. If Damien believed she'd remain docile, he was wrong. She would watch, listen, and gather every scrap of information. Somehow, she vowed, she would break free. Lily woke the next morning with every muscle tense, her mind still reeling from the events of the previous night. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the lavish bedroom, a gilded prison she couldn't escape. Her eyes landed on a sleek phone placed on the bedside table, its screen locked. A note lay beside it, typed in precise font, for official use only. There was no signature, but Lily had no doubt who had left it there. She inhaled slowly, resentment flaring. She was now Mrs. Blackwood in name, yet everything about her life had been seized by Damien's power. The phone might let her call for help, or it might simply be a trap. She pressed the button tentatively. A security prompt flashed for a code she didn't know, confirming her suspicions. This was just another layer of control. A knock on the door interrupted her fuming. A petite woman entered, dressed in a crisp blouse and pencil skirt. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood. I'm Naomi, your personal assistant. Mr. Blackwood asked me to help you prepare for the day." Lily rose from the bed, discomfort simmering in her stomach. "I can dress myself, thanks." Naomi smiled gently. "I understand, but Mr. Blackwood wants you to join him for breakfast in 30 minutes. There's a closet full of new clothing in the adjoining room." Reluctantly, Lily followed Naomi into a walk-in closet lined with rows of designer outfits. She recalled her old uniform, faded jeans, scuffed sneakers, items far more practical for hauling packages around town. Here, everything was exquisite and intimidating, just like the mansion. She selected a simple dress, ignoring the more extravagant options. When Lily arrived at the dining room, she found Damien seated at one end of a long, polished table laden with fresh fruit, pastries, and steaming coffee. He didn't glance up as she approached, calmly scanning something on his tablet. Only when she stood across from him did he set it aside. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite. She complied, fighting the urge to snap at him. Her gaze flickered to the small number of staff bustling around, placing dishes just so. With an audience, any confrontation would likely end poorly. "You'll be meeting my legal team this afternoon," Damien said, his tone businesslike. They prepared documents clarifying this arrangement. Lily's stomach twisted. "You mean contracts that keep me on a leash?" His dark eyes pinned her. "Confidentiality agreements, post-nuptial clauses, nothing more than formalities. If you cooperate, you'll walk away unscathed once my business merger is finalized." She bristled. "I never agreed to any business merger. I never agreed to any of this." "You agreed at the altar," Damien countered. "Perhaps under unusual circumstances, but your signature is legal. My lawyers will confirm that." Their conversation paused when a maid stepped forward with a pot of coffee. Lily forced a polite smile, while her blood boiled. She was a hostage in a charade, and Damien was perfectly willing to remind her of it at every turn. After breakfast, Naomi led Lily to a sunlit study where rows of leather-bound tomes lined the shelves. Three lawyers waited at a large wooden table, their expressions carefully neutral. They introduced themselves one by one. Stern faces, crisp suits, polite but distant demeanors. A stack of papers lay in front of Lily. Each page bristled with fine print, references to joint assets, and clauses about non-disclosure. When she skimmed a section mentioning penalties for breach, her heart sank. The financial repercussions alone could ruin her for life. "Is this even enforceable?" she asked, voice quavering with indignation. A tall, silver-haired lawyer cleared his throat. "The marriage license is valid. These additional agreements ensure both parties honor their obligations. You'll receive financial support, provided you fulfill certain public duties. As Mrs. Blackwood." Lily wanted to scream that she'd never asked for support. She only wanted freedom. But Damien stood behind the lawyers, arms folded, his expression impassive. If she tore up the contracts, she had no doubt he would bury her in legal proceedings. Slowly, she signed each page, feeling more trapped with every stroke of the pen. "Excellent," said another lawyer, sliding the documents into a folder. "We appreciate your cooperation." Cooperation. The word soured in Lily's mouth. She watched as Damien escorted the lawyers out. The moment the door clicked shut, she whirled on him. "You can't just tie me up with legal papers and call it marriage." He regarded her coolly. "I just did." Her hands balled into fists. "I hate this." He stepped closer, quiet menace in his posture. "Hate it all you want, but understand this. The consequences of defiance won't fall lightly on you. Unless, of course, you crave a fight you can't win." She stared at him, equal parts anger and unease roiling in her stomach. He turned on his heel and disappeared down the hallway, leaving her with no doubt he had the upper hand. Naomi returned, suggesting a tour of the estate. Numbly, Lily followed her through rooms gleaming with marble floors and gilded ceilings. A spa, a private theater, endless suites. Each display of luxury felt more claustrophobic than the last. In one gallery, she paused before a massive portrait of Damien's father, who looked every bit as formidable as a son. "My father built Blackwood Enterprises from scratch," Damien had told her last night. Just a single clipped sentence. She sensed something unspoken there, a family history shrouded in secrets. Why else would he force a random stranger to stand in as a bride? Lily sighed, continuing the tour with Naomi. By evening, her thoughts spun like a storm. She dined alone at a table big enough for 20, stewing in frustration. Damien was conspicuously absent again, consumed by phone calls and meetings that seemed to govern his life. When she finally returned to the lavish bedroom, she paced back and forth, glaring at the locked phone. She felt cut off from the world, from the life she'd once had. She thought of her tiny apartment, her friends who probably wondered where she was, the boss who'd surely fired her by now. Yet none of that stung as much as the knowledge that Damien had ensnared her so neatly. Dropping into a chair by the window, Lily peered out at the sprawling gardens below. Twinkling lights illuminated fountains and hedges, a picture of controlled perfection, just like Damien Blackwood's carefully curated image. She realized he didn't merely want a stand-in bride. He wanted a pawn who would never threaten his power. But Lily wasn't one to surrender. A spark of defiance flared in her chest. Damien might have money and legal contracts, but she still had a mind of her own. If she found the right leverage, some vulnerability in his empire, maybe she could bargain her way out. She pushed away from the window, refusing to let hopelessness swallow her. For now, she'd play along, nod politely, sign his papers. But she would also watch, listen, and learn. Damien Blackwood had trapped her in his mansion, yet he'd underestimated her resilience. Someday soon, she promised herself, she would break down every wall he built around her and walk out free. Lily paced the length of her spacious suite, nerves on edge. Each day in the Blackwood Mansion felt more stifling than the last. She hadn't laid eyes on her old, threadbare apartment in over a week, and each hour reminded her she was trapped in a world of wealth she never asked for. Damien remained a distant figure. Their conversations were clipped, his tone cold. He summoned her for events or meetings, but never offered more than curt instructions. Most days, Lily endured fitting for gowns, rehearsals for investor dinners, and polite small talk with staff who treated her like a guest rather than a prisoner. One afternoon, Naomi knocked softly, then entered with that gentle smile Lily was growing suspicious of. "Mr. Blackwood has a meeting in the East Wing. He wants you to attend." Lily's stomach twisted. Another meeting. Another round of forced smiles. But she nodded, slipping on a neat blazer. She decided to cooperate, at least outwardly, while quietly gathering any clue that might explain why Damien demanded a wife. When they arrived at the East Wing's Grand Salon, a group of executives was already inside. Damien, standing at the head of a long table, beckoned Lily closer. "Gentlemen, my wife will be observing today," he said briskly. Lily bristled at the possessive tone, but kept her expression neutral. She moved to a seat near the window, half listening as they discussed something about overseas expansion. Her gaze wandered to Damien's face. He seemed tense, as though every word required painstaking effort. Toward the end of the meeting, one executive leaned closer to Damien and murmured, "If we can't finalize the merger soon, the board might reconsider." Lily overheard enough to sense the warning. Damien stiffened, jaw flexing. Within moments, he dismissed everyone with a thin smile. She rose, feeling the pressure in the room like a tangible weight. When the others filed out, Damien addressed her quietly, not meeting her eyes. "Go with Naomi. I'll speak to you later." He left before she could ask anything. Unspoken questions piled in her mind, building like a storm cloud. Why was this merger critical enough to trap an unsuspecting delivery girl in a marriage? That evening, Lily's curiosity spiked again. As she passed the corridor near Damien's office, she heard hushed voices. She paused, heart pounding. "Does she know the truth?" asked a male voice. "She doesn't know," another replied, lower still. "She can never know. If she finds out, she'll run, and everything falls apart." Lily's hand tightened on the doorframe. The word "run" blazed in her mind like an alarm. They were talking about her. But who were they, and what were they hiding? Footsteps approached, so she darted away, pulse hammering. She spent the rest of the night replaying those whispered words, anxiety twisting her thoughts. 2 days later, Damien summoned her to attend a charity gala. Naomi helped Lily into a midnight blue gown, then escorted her to a limousine idling outside. Damien was already inside, staring out the window. He offered no greeting beyond a curt nod. At the event, held in a dazzling hotel ballroom, Lily found herself introduced to philanthropists and CEOs as Damien's lovely wife. She forced cordial smiles, wishing she were anywhere else. Yet, she caught glimpses of another side of Damien. When a rude socialite sniped at Lily's common upbringing, Damien's voice cut in, cold and lethal. "She is my wife. Insult her again and you'll regret it." Heat rushed to Lily's cheeks, an odd mixture of anger and gratitude. She wanted to hate him, to see him as nothing more than the captor who'd upended her life. Yet part of her couldn't ignore that flash of protectiveness. Later, after exchanging empty pleasantries with a gaggle of investors, Lily stepped onto a balcony to breathe. The city lights sprawled below, a reminder of freedom she couldn't touch. Suddenly, Damien appeared, his posture rigid. "You shouldn't vanish like that," he said, voice low. She turned, frustration creeping in. "I needed air. That's not against your rules, is it?" His gaze flickered. "No, but people notice everything. If they suspect this marriage isn't legitimate." She crossed her arms. "They'd find out you tricked me into it." His jaw tensed. "Careful, Lily. You're on thin ice." She refused to shrink back. "I overheard 2 of your associates talking. They said I can't know something. That if I did, I'd run." "Why?" A flash of alarm crossed his features. "Gone in an instant. Stay out of matters that don't concern you." She let out a bitter laugh. "Matters that don't concern me? You dragged me into this." Damien's eyes hardened. This conversation is over. He stormed back inside, leaving her trembling with fury and unanswered questions. That night, she couldn't sleep. The memory of his protectiveness warred with her anger over his manipulations. There was more to Damien Blackwood than ruthless ambition, some inner torment he refused to share. Before dawn, Lily ventured downstairs, determined to find answers. If those documents she'd once glimpsed in Damien's office existed, maybe they held the key. She reached his office door, hand hovering over the knob. Locked, of course. She had come prepared, though a small hairpin, borrowed from Naomi's stash, sat in her pocket. Her heart thudded as she knelt, fiddling with the lock. After several tense minutes, a satisfying click rewarded her efforts. Inside, the darkness smelled of polished wood and faint cologne. She gingerly clicked on a desk lamp, scanning the surface for anything labeled with her name or mention of a marriage clause. Papers lay in neat stacks, but she found little more than financial statements. Then a locked drawer caught her eye. She tried the hairpin again, but the lock resisted. Time was running out. Anyone could appear. With shaking hands, she tugged, and the drawer slid open. Inside rested a thick file labeled Confidential, Bride Contract. Lily's breath caught. Skimming the first page, she spotted references to her father's name, Monroe, and legal obligations that hinged on Lily's marriage. She scanned lines mentioning old debts, hush money, and terms that guaranteed Blackwood Enterprises would remain under Damien's control only if he married someone from the Monroe family. Shock jolted through her. Her father, who had abandoned her years ago, was tied to Damien's father. Their ruined partnership apparently left one final stipulation. The Blackwoods had salvaged their empire if a Blackwood married Monroe before a certain deadline. Suddenly, footsteps sounded in the hall. Heart pounding, Lily shoved the file back, closed the drawer, and switched off the lamp. She was out of the office in seconds, fleeing like a thief. In her suite, she locked the door, lungs heaving. Everything was clearer now. Damien's entire company, his family legacy, depended on binding her to him. That was the secret. She wasn't just an accidental bride. She was the key to saving Blackwood Enterprises from collapse. But if that was true, what else had Damien hidden? And how far would he go to keep her from running the moment she learned the truth? Lily spent the night wide awake, her heart hammering as she replayed what she'd read in Damien's hidden file. The revelation gnawed at her. She was a key to saving Blackwood Enterprises from ruin. Her father's name, Monroe, was tied to Blackwood's fate, ensuring only a marriage between the two families could salvage Damien's empire. Morning came, and she rose on shaky legs. Part of her wanted to confront Damien immediately, but a deeper fear warned her to wait. If he realized she knew the truth, how far would he go to keep her under control? Steeling herself, she dressed and made her way downstairs, determined to stay alert. Damien waited in the dining room. As usual, the tension between them crackled in the air. She approached the table, bracing herself for his brusque commands, but instead he glanced up with an unreadable expression. "You're late?" he said quietly, though there was no real anger in his tone. "Didn't sleep well," Lily managed, sinking into the chair across from him. She tried to keep her voice steady, her face blank. If she showed any sign of what she knew, it could be disastrous. To her surprise, Damien studied her with something akin to concern. "You look pale." Lily stilled. She expected a cutting remark, not a hint of worry. "I'm fine," she muttered, though her pounding heart suggested otherwise. He seemed ready to say more, but the arrival of breakfast trays cut him off. The staff moved gracefully around them, setting out dishes. Lily forced herself to eat, aware that eyes were on her, Damien's especially. When Naomi arrived to escort her to yet another fitting, Lily exhaled in relief. Anything to escape that wary, near-sympathetic gaze. She followed Naomi through gleaming corridors until they reached a private salon where a tailor waited with fabrics and measuring tapes. They were halfway through pinning an evening gown when Lily's head began to swim. She blinked, feeling the room tilt. A sudden wave of dizziness crashed over her, and the tailor gasped as Lily staggered. Naomi quickly guided her to a seat. "Mrs. Blackwood, are you all right?" the tailor asked, alarmed. Lily tried to steady her breathing. I'm just tired." Naomi studied her with worry. "I'll call Mr. Blackwood." Panic jolted Lily. She didn't want Damien's attention, not when she was trying to conceal that she knew everything. But she was too weak to protest. Nausea coiled in her stomach, beads of sweat forming on her brow. Moments later, Damien stormed into the salon, face drawn with concern. "What happened?" The tailor and Naomi spoke at once. Lily was too drained to interrupt. Her vision blurred as Damien scooped her into his arms, ignoring her feeble protest. He carried her through the mansion until they reached her suite, where he laid her gently on the bed. "Doctor," he ordered to no one in particular. Footsteps rushed away, presumably to fetch medical assistance. Lily's eyelids fluttered. She tried to speak, but her throat felt scratchy, her head heavy. Damien's cool hand pressed against her forehead. "You're burning up," he muttered, even in her feverish state. Lily was struck by the gentle way he touched her. It was the first time she'd seen anything close to genuine tenderness in him. She wanted to resist it, to remind herself he was the enemy, but in that moment, she couldn't. A doctor arrived swiftly, administering medication and advising rest. Damien hovered at the bedside with a frown. "How long have you felt like this?" She swallowed hard. "A day or so," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I didn't think it was serious. You should have said something." The reprimand in his voice was tempered by worry. Lily managed a sardonic smile. "I wasn't aware you cared." He didn't respond, just handed her a glass of water. She drank, feeling the cool liquid soothe her parched throat. Exhaustion tugged at her, and she slipped in and out of fitful dreams. Each time she surfaced, Damien was there, quietly observing, as if afraid to leave her side. Hours passed. When she finally roused properly, she found him seated in a chair, staring at her with an intensity that made her pulse jump. "Why are you still here?" she croaked. "Because you're ill," he answered simply. "And despite what you might think, I'm not a monster." She turned her face away, unsure how to respond. She knew about the marriage clause, about his father's debts, but she also saw this unguarded Damien, the man who'd carried her, stayed by her. Conflicting emotions tore at her. "Why me?" she blurted before she could stop herself. "Out of all the women you could have married, why me?" A flicker of something, pain, perhaps, crossed his face. "You know why." She almost admitted she did, but fear tightened her throat. Admitting she'd read those documents might provoke him to clamp down even harder. "I don't," she said instead, her tone guarded. Damien exhaled, as if weighed down by secrets he couldn't share. "You're tired. Get some rest. We can talk later." She wanted to push, to demand answers, yet her body felt heavy with fever and frustration. She closed her eyes, drifting off again. When she woke at dusk, the fever had eased, replaced by an ache in her chest. Naomi was there, helping her sip broth. "Mr. Blackwood has canceled his meetings," Naomi said softly. "He insisted on staying here." Lily gave a brittle laugh. How noble. She tried to mask the part of her that felt oddly touched. Over the following days, Damien's concern never wavered. He brought her tea, summoned the doctor for daily checkups, and ensured the staff gave her space to recover. Lily caught glimpses of him gazing at her as if he, too, wrestled with something he'd rather not feel. Little by little, she improved, well enough to wander the mansion corridors again. She found Damien in his study one afternoon, going through papers with his usual frown. Tentatively, she stepped inside. He glanced up, tension visible in his jaw. "You should be resting." She shrugged. "I'm feeling better." An awkward silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "I apologize if I seem harsh. I only intended to protect what I built." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. "I'm not sure why you're telling me this." His gaze flicked to the documents spread out before him. "Because I realize you didn't choose this. And because—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Just take care of yourself. You don't need to push so hard." Something shifted in Lily then, a small crack in the wall of hatred she'd built around her heart. She still despised that he coerced her into marriage, yet she glimpsed a man carrying burdens she hadn't fully understood. "Damien," she said softly, surprising them both by using his first name without anger. "Thank you for helping me." He looked startled, as though kindness was the last thing he expected. The tension between them didn't vanish, but it changed, becoming charged in a different way. She left the study with a swirl of emotions: anger, confusion, and an undeniable flicker of warmth, whether she liked it or not. Lily Monroe was beginning to see the man beneath the billionaire's icy facade, and that realization was as unsettling as any contract or secret she'd uncovered so far. Lily woke with her mind still buzzing from conflicting emotions. In the span of a few days, she had glimpsed a caring side of Damien that softened the anger she carried. Yet every time she remembered the documents in his locked drawer, the ones tie her family to his fate, her outrage flared anew. She wanted answers, but a mix of fear and hesitant sympathy kept her silent. The mansion's opulence pressing around her like a heavy cloak she couldn't cast off. Surrounded by marble floors and priceless art, she felt more like a costly ornament than a person. She sensed Damien watching her too closely, wary that she might uncover the truth he'd so carefully hidden. That morning, Naomi arrived with an apologetic smile. "Mr. Blackwood wants you in his office," she announced. Lily detected tension in her voice, as though Naomi, too, sensed a shift in the air. Trying not to tremble, Lily squared her shoulders and followed. Damien stood behind his large desk, his posture ramrod straight. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, etching stern lines across his face. The moment Lily entered, he lifted a folder from the desk and flipped it open. "I've arranged a temporary agreement with the property manager," he said, voice firm. "Once the merger is finalized, you'll have options, a generous settlement, and housing arrangements should you prefer to leave." His eyes flicked up, and she thought she saw something akin to regret. "It won't be much longer," he added. "We only have a few final signings to secure." Lily forced calm into her voice. "I see. So, you're already planning for my exit." He gave a terse nod. "It's best for both of us." She gritted her teeth. She wanted to hurl accusations, to demand he tell her about the bride contract and why her father's name was involved. But she recalled the gentleness he'd shown when she'd been ill, the guarded vulnerability that flickered in his eyes. She couldn't decide if it made her furious or left her conflicted. That evening, Lily found herself unable to rest. Memories of her old life weighed on her. Friends she missed, her tiny apartment that, despite its flaws, was at least her own. Wrapping herself in a robe, she left her suite, drifting aimlessly to the grand hallways. She half hoped she might stumble on more clues. At the far end of a corridor, she spotted a room she'd never explored before. Its doors were slightly ajar, warm lamplight spilling out. She crept forward, peering inside. Rows of filing cabinets lined the walls, each drawer labeled with date or project name. Scanning the labels, her heart stuttered at the sight of a drawer marked Monroe. Her hand shook as she pulled it open. Inside lay neatly arranged folders. She lifted the top file and skimmed it, breath catching at the mention of her father. He owed large sums to Blackwood Enterprises, apparently from a botched deal years ago. More pages detailed lawsuits, old newspaper clippings, and a single contract that spelled out the unthinkable. A marital union was the only way to fulfill a decades-old agreement that would erase her father's debt and keep the Blackwood legacy intact. Just then, footsteps sounded behind her. She whirled to see Damien in the doorway. His face darkened in an instant. "You shouldn't be in here," he growled, voice dangerously low. Clutching the folder to her chest, Lily backed away. "So it's true," she whispered, voice trembling with fury and hurt. "You forced me into marriage because of some twisted arrangement our fathers made?" Damien shut the door behind him, eyes blazing. "That's only part of it." She shook her head, fighting tears. "Is there more? Or have you lied about everything?" Anger contorted his features. Then something like sorrow flickered across them. "It began as a business move," he admitted. "But you and I both know this marriage isn't just that anymore." A bitter laugh escaped her. "So I'm supposed to believe you've developed actual feelings? Or is that another ploy to keep me in line?" He stepped closer, and she could almost feel his turmoil. "I can't deny I resented your family. Your father ruined mine. We lost nearly everything trying to repair the damage he caused. When I discovered that a clause existed, mandating a marriage to Monroe before a certain date, I saw a path to both restoration and revenge." Tears burned in her eyes. "Revenge?" Damien exhaled, tension straining his voice. I never intended for things to go this far. You were just supposed to be the missing piece. I thought I'd marry you, secure my company, and watch you suffer for your father's sins. Lily's throat constricted with shock. So that was his plan, a carefully orchestrated punishment, using her as a pawn to pay for her father's misdeeds. Fresh betrayal knifed through her, stealing her breath. I gave up my life, she managed, voice quavering. You've trapped me, humiliated me, all to get back at someone I barely know? He swallowed hard, voice rough. I wanted you to feel the same helplessness I felt when my world crumbled. But, he paused, fist clenched, you weren't supposed to make me feel anything. You weren't supposed to become more than a tool. The folder slipped from Lily's grasp, papers fanning across the polished floor. So all your kindness, your concern when I was sick, it was just... No, Damien said sharply, stepping closer. That part wasn't fake. Somewhere along the line, I realized Don't say it, she hissed, tears blurring her vision. Don't you dare say you love me. Not when you've turned my life into a nightmare. His eyes searched hers, desperation etched on his face. I never planned on this, Lily. I'm sorry. She cut him off with a trembling hand. Enough. She swiped at tears, determined not to break down in front of him. It's over. Whatever you claim to feel, it doesn't matter. Not after what you've done. Turning on her heel, she fled the room, ignoring his call for her to stop. Her footsteps echoed down the corridor, tears streaking her cheeks. Outside, rain battered the state grounds, but she didn't care. She needed to escape, to breathe air free of his lies. She found her way to a side door, wind whipping her hair as she slipped into the storm. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the manicured gardens, the tall iron gates. She plunged forward, not knowing where she'd go, only that she had to run from a man who deceived her so completely. Damien's shouts echoed in the downpour, but Lily kept going. His betrayal felt like a knife in her back, and she refused to let him see how deeply it had cut. She had nothing, no plan, nowhere to stay. Yet anything was better than staying under his roof, pretending his affection was real. In that single night, Lily's illusion shattered. She had once felt the stirrings of something tender for Damien, but now she realized just how cruelly he'd manipulated her for his own ends. She was done. No matter the cost, she would never let him control her again. Lily didn't stop running until the mansion's lights faded behind her. Thunder rolled overhead, rain lashed in her face, but she refused to slow down. Her heart pounded with fear and fury, Damien's betrayal echoing in every ragged breath. Once she cleared the gates, she stumbled onto a deserted road, soaked to the bone. She had no car, no phone, no real plan, only a fierce need to escape him. A passing taxi pulled over, the driver eyeing her with concern. Lily climbed in, shivering. The driver asked no questions beyond where to, and Lily gave an address she barely remembered, a distant neighborhood where a cheap motel might offer refuge. She spent the night in a cramped room that smelled of stale cigarettes, curled on a thin mattress, tears mingling with the lingering rain. Over the next few days, she kept her head down, using her last few dollars on basics. She wanted no contact with anyone, especially Damien. Yet each night she dreamed of him. Those dark eyes filled with regret, the gentleness she'd seen when he thought no one was watching. Waking up brought her no peace. The memory of his calculated revenge cut too deep, despite her best efforts. She couldn't stay hidden forever. Damien was powerful, and she knew he would search every corner of the city if he truly wanted her found. However, the only real glimpses she got him came from a battered television in the motel lobby. News anchors breathlessly reported on the downfall of Blackwood Enterprises. Headlines declared, Damien Blackwood halts merger, stocks plummet, rumors swirl, Blackwood cancels key contracts. Lily stared, disbelief warring with anger. Why would he sabotage the deal he'd spent his life trying to secure? None of the coverage gave answers, only speculation. Some insisted he'd lost his mind. Others claimed a massive scandal was brewing. But Lily knew Damien better than that. Every step he took had purpose. She left the motel each morning, wandering aimlessly to avoid detection. Her funds dwindled, forcing her to spend hours in cheap diners nursing a single cup of coffee. One afternoon, she overheard a pair of businessmen talking in hushed tones. "Did you hear what Blackwood did?" one asked. "He's selling our properties, shutting down entire offices. It's like he's determined to burn his empire to the ground." Her stomach twisted. Why would Damien destroy everything he'd built? She refused to believe it was remorse alone. Yet the more she heard, the more she felt a pang of guilt, a flicker of worry that she couldn't extinguish. On the fourth night, her motel door rattled. Lily's pulse rocketed. She braced herself for the worst, but the voice on the other side startled her. "Lily," Damien said quietly. "Please, open up." She hesitated. Part of her wanted to scream at him to leave. Another part ached with relief just to hear his voice. Slowly, she slid the chain aside and cracked the door. Damien stood there in the flickering hallway light. His hair plastered to his forehead by rain, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Her anger flared. "How did you find me?" He swallowed hard. "I've been looking everywhere." "I don't want to see you," she snapped, but her voice trembled. "Please," he repeated, a raw edge to his tone. His words fell short, and he sank to his knees, ignoring the filthy carpet. "I was wrong. Every bit of it. My revenge, the lies. I regret all of it." Tears threatened her composure. "You can't just show up here and expect me to forgive you. You tricked me. You used me." He lowered his gaze. "Yes, I started this out of spite. I wanted to make you suffer for your father's mistakes. But I never meant to care about you." Lily's chest ached. "Then why did you destroy your company? That was your life." A humorless laugh escaped him. "It was never life. It was a prison, built on hatred, resentment, and a deal I never asked for. I threw it away because none of it matters without you." She stared at him, torn between fury and a tug of longing. "So you found me to do what?" "Beg." Damien nodded, voice hoarse. "Yes, I'll beg if that's what it takes. I am so sorry, Lily. I never wanted to hurt you. Let me fix this, please." She stepped back, letting him into the room. The dim light cast shadows on his face, highlighting how hollow his cheeks looked, how frantic his eyes were. Gone was the imperious billionaire. In his place knelt a man on the edge of losing everything. "There's no fixing it," she whispered, arms folded. "You can't erase what you did." "No, I can't," he admitted, rising slowly. "But I can spend every day proving I'm more than my past. Give me that chance." She studied him for a long moment, her heart pounding. "Only if you burn it all down," she said softly. "Every last piece of your revenge. No more deals, no more hidden contracts, no more vendetta against my family." For a breath, Damien closed his eyes. Then quietly he said, "Done. I've already started. If it means I can have you back, I'll tear down every last bit of that empire." She wanted to trust him, but her wounds ran deep. "You swear?" "I swear," he replied, voice trembling with conviction. "I'll prove it every day, for as long as you'll let me." An uncertain silence filled the room. Finally, Lily exhaled shakily. "Meet me at the mansion gates tomorrow night," she said, "where this all began." He nodded, gratitude shining in his eyes, then left quietly. The next evening, Lily arrived at the massive iron gates. They stood open, flanked by silent guards who bowed and withdrew as soon as she stepped inside. Wind rustled the dark hedges, an echo of her first night here. Damien appeared on the driveway, looking both resolute and terrified. Headline after headline in the last 24 hours had documented his empire's collapse, the total dismantling of Blackwood enterprises. The final blow came that morning. Official reports stating Damien Blackwood had liquidated nearly all assets, effectively destroying his father's legacy. He approached Lily, eyes never leaving hers. "I'm ready to give you everything I have left. Myself. Nothing else remains." She fought tears, recalling every wound, every betrayal, and the fleeting kindness beneath. "Are you sure this is what you want?" His hand shook slightly as he drew her close. "I'm sure. Marry me again, Lily. For real this time." She could hardly breathe. The bitterness of betrayal still stung, but she saw the man who'd thrown away his kingdom for her. You'd risk it all again? Damien's voice trembled with honesty. You're all that matters now. I'd do it 1,000 times. With those words, the final barriers around her heart collapsed. She remembered the fury, the grief, the unexpected moments of compassion he'd shown, and she knew she had a choice. Stepping forward, she laced her fingers through his. Yes, she whispered. I'll marry you for real. His eyes closed in silent relief, tears slipping down his cheeks. Thank you, he breathed. Amid the ruins of Blackwood's empire, under the same gates where her life had changed forever, Lily Monroe finally said, I do, sealing a promise forged from regret, sacrifice, and a love neither of them had seen coming. The end. Enjoyed the story? We invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing more beautiful stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your effort. See you again.